today we're going to be going over the removal and reinstalling of the SIC membranes back into the module. The tools you're going to need is a dead blow hammer. You want to make sure you use a dead blow hammer only. A 13 millimeter socket and a universal joint. This is a 3/8 by 3" extension. And then I'm using a cordless impact wrench. You can use a ratchet too. Cordless impact will make it go by a lot easier. So the first thing we're going to need to do is remove the headers. That's the green tubes along the side. We'll need to remove both those first. And then you'll also have little star washers that are going to be right up underneath the nuts of up underneath the 13 millimeter nuts. You need to make sure you remove those. Don't lose them. And then just lightly tap off the headers. So the reason why you don't want to use a metal hammer is because you will be hitting the threads right here, so you don't want to damage them. But the dead blow hammers, since they do have the plastic outer lining on them, will not damage them as bad. And then you just knock them out where all the membranes are separated. Remove the header, and then go to the other side. And so if you just have like one plate you have to remove due to it being cracked and all that, you can just go in here, find that plate, you can remove it, and then you can just replace it and put everything back together. But on this module, we're going to be replacing all of the plates. We got 40 plates in this particular module. When you replace them, you want to make sure you don't put too much pressure on them, because if you do, it'll do that. They will break. So you got to make sure you don't put too much pressure on the modules. So when I'm doing it, I'm just putting enough pressure to pull them up. If you need to pull out 2 at a time, that's fine. Just don't put too much pressure on them or they will break. Now we're going to go back in there with the installment of the new plates. And the main thing that I want to do is we want to check to make sure all the O-rings are there. You'll have 2 O-rings on each side of each end cap. And basically just make sure that they're all intact. If you're pulling off of an existing one, again, just check the O-rings, making sure that they're intact. If you see one that's tore or starting to fray on you, go ahead and replace that O-ring. The membranes do have these little pins, plastic pins sticking out, and they will be lining up with this bracket down here at the bottom that's notched out, and the pins just slide right in there. You got one on each side of the module. Okay, and if you do run into a membrane where it's got a bad O-ring, all you need to do is just pinch it up a little bit and then just roll it on out. There's 2 O-rings, so just work that second one out and then just repeat that whole process all over again. When you reassemble them, just put them back in their grooves and just work them around until they go back in their grooves. Just verify that all the plates are where they're supposed to be. And the other thing we want to use is this Molykote 111. It's a O-ring grease. And then you just start lubricating all the O-rings. Now we're going to put the headers on. Again, if you notice right now, the bolts don't come out, but if you rotate them a little bit, they will slide on out. So if you do happen to have one come off, there is a flat spot on the header. Right there, you just go in at that one and you just twist it. And then basically, we start putting it back in the module. So the first header is going to be the most difficult one to get on because you have to line up all the plates with the corresponding holes in the header. And when you're putting the bolts back on, again, they are 13 millimeters, not a lot of room in the back, so it can be a little bit difficult to get them on. So what I'm doing is just lining up all the plates within the holes. So once you get them in there, you'll feel them. You feel them push in. And then I just tighten them up a little bit. You don't want to tighten them all the way down just yet. You do want to put a little bit of pressure on the headers, or on this one header you just installed. So you'll see them start coming in. If you want to, you just give it a few taps with your hand. The O-rings are further seated in there. Now we're going to go to the opposite side. Again, finding the holes in the metal frame. This header is going to be the easiest one to go on because all the plates are already in alignment. Okay, get your dead blow hammer, and then just lightly tap on the header. While you're doing it, we're wanting to watch for these O-rings. Make sure we're not going to pinch an O-ring. If you pinch an O-ring, you want to back it off. If it doesn't want to go all the way on there, go ahead and tighten up the bolts again. Now that we got the membranes all seated in there, or all the way in, then it's time to tighten up these J-bolts on the headers. And once everything's done there, just get another light tap. Make sure everything's nice and seated. Make sure you're not seeing any O-rings coming up. And the other thing that you also want to do is check the other bolts. You got, these are 10mm bolts on the bottom. Just make sure that they're tightened up. And if you do see one that's loose, just go ahead and tighten them up. Yeah, so right over here, this one actually is almost all the way off. So we'll just go ahead and tighten that one up. You don't want to go get it too tight, especially if you're using the cordless impact, because you will break these bottom bolts off. Once you have that, just make sure everything is tight, put it back on the other stack. This module is back in service. If you do happen to lose one of the header O-rings, put a little bit of lubrication on the O-rings, put that back in the header. And this module is done with plate replacements.